Hello and welcome into episode 6 of Snakes Territory. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman, and today I am very excited to be joined by a special guest for the very first time on this new Snakes Territory podcast. It is Alex Weiner, who does an outstanding job covering the Diamondbacks over at ArizonaSports.com, also the host of the Ain't No Fang podcast, where you can find on all of the podcast platforms out there. Alex, much like Jack, you and I have spent a whole lot of time together the last few years in the Diamondbacks press box, talking D-backs baseball, covering games together. I definitely it feels weird right now not being in the press box alongside you guys on a daily basis, but excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. A bit of a home and home here from our preseason preview. And yeah, no, we miss having you up there, obviously, but I'm happy to join on and talk ball with you anytime.
So Alex, Jack and I have already, we've already given some of our observations on this very young Diamondback season, and I imagine there's probably some overlap between what thoughts and feelings are sort of in our minds and what would be on your mind at this very young stage in the season. But I'm curious to start things off. What are your observations, your initial takeaways on the 7-6 Arizona Diamondbacks a couple weeks into the season?
Yeah, right. It hasn't been as consistent as anybody would have liked, really, in all facets of the game. They played their best game of the season. Troy Lovullo called it their most complete win of the year by far on Wednesday against the Orioles, a 9-0 win. Top of the order was great. The pitching was great. The defense was much better. It's kind of more along the lines of what we expected to watch because, as I'm sure you and Jack have gone over, the pitching really has been kind of a sore spot to start the season, which is not something anybody expected. But they're coming off of back-to-back quality starts and going into a weekend series where they'll have Eduardo Rodriguez, Corbin Burnes, and Zach Gallen. It's a good opportunity to potentially string these together. Defensively, it's been very bizarre to watch some of the mistakes that we saw, especially because it's a team that you see, I'm like, oh, did they not take spring training seriously? That certainly wasn't really the case there. That's never going to be the case with a team with this kind of leadership group. And so it has been a kind of a strange sight to watch them play defense as poorly as they have. It was better the last couple of games, except for a couple of moments here and there, notably the Lourdes Gurriel throw into orbit. But other than that, the defense has been pretty clean the last couple of games. And then offensively, you losing Ketel Marte is just a tough beat. And it's something that they're going to have to overcome over the next however many weeks he's out. Don't have a specific timeline on that. Troy Lovullo mentioned it's a series of weeks, so we kept it kind of purposely vague. Which is, you're accustomed to, I'm sure. But the offense, Corbin Carroll has been unbelievable to start the year, and he's gotten some good production from the guys right behind him, and Geraldo Perdomo, Pavin Smith, and Josh Naylor. There's certainly plenty of other guys who they're looking to step up. But offensively, even if it hasn't been entirely consistent, they've still been producing at a pretty high clip and one of the highest scoring teams in Major League Baseball again. So that's kind of the general overview of what we've been watching over the first 13 games. And 7-6 probably seems a bit disappointing. It certainly is for them. But it's April 10th, and they have an opportunity against another National League team who could be vying for a postseason spot at the end of the year. And, these are important series to take care of business with.
I know at this stage in the season, it's maybe crazy to talk about like things that have surprised us because frankly, in a sample size this small, like really anything can happen. Like anyone can sort of bat 400 or like 050 for 2 weeks, right? It's just kind of the nature of baseball. But when you think about surprises, like things that have stood out so far in this, again, very young season, what kind of stands out to you? Is there anything that has caught you off guard or anything like that?
I think the defense, I think that's the main thing. It's just so jarring because this is a team that last year, fewest errors in Major League Baseball, and the last 2 years especially, that's been a weapon of theirs. And it's a separator for them. The Dodgers don't have this incredible defense, neither do the Padres. But if the Diamondbacks do, and they can win games in the margins that way, that's what gives them a leg up over some of those other really talented National League West teams. So that's probably been one. The inconsistency of the starting rotation, I get it's disappointing. But at the same time, it's 2 runs through the rotation. Fott looked really good last night against Baltimore. Merrill, after a bumpy first inning, looks really good. This will be an interesting weekend. I'm very curious to see what Corbin Burnes looks like in start 3. It would be his first home start. He's going up against his former team. He's been looking for kind of the feel with the cutter and wasn't entirely consistent with it again against the Nationals, right? The Nationals last weekend. So he's one that, like, yeah, the first 2 starts maybe haven't gone the way that people anticipated given the contract, but it's 2 starts at the end of the day, and I'm curious to see what it'll look like going into this week.
As you think about the players that are most important for the Diamondbacks this season, I guess is a question that you very much could think about before the season even begins. But now that we're 2 weeks in, I imagine maybe the answer to that question has changed, maybe it hasn't. But who do you view in 2025 as like the Diamondbacks can go where they want to go if such and such player is able to, take a big step forward or whatever that might be? What names maybe come to mind for you along those lines?
The easy one's Corbin Carroll.
Sure.
Obviously, I mean, just based on the way that he finished last season, kind of the expectations going into this year, and now you're starting off the year where for however many weeks you don't have Ketel Marte, you need him to be the engine that makes this offense go, and he's been unbelievable to start the season. I
Yeah.
know there was a little bit of stress from some fans seeing him with his hands in a different position in spring training after he made some tweaks before last season that ultimately, didn't go his way, and then he had to readjust, and he did, and he was great down the stretch. But everything coming off the bat has been on fire. I mean, 10 extra base hits in 13 games. Looked it up. Only 6 Diamondbacks had ever done that before. And it's like Luis Gonzalez and Troy Gloss, if you remember that season with Troy Gloss and
Yeah.
Chris Young and Reggie Sanders. So it's a short list of guys who've been able to do that. So he's just impacting pretty much every single game he's playing in. That's kind of the easy answer. I think Gabby Moreno is high on that list of if they're going to go far. I think a lot of people are expecting kind of the Gabby Moreno breakout season. We haven't quite seen it yet. It is very early. But the way he was swinging the bat towards the end of last year, he got hurt at kind of a really inopportune time because he was on fire when he got injured and missed a handful of weeks in August and going into early September. Yeah, coming into this year, he leaned out going into the offseason, or in the offseason, he kind of leaned up a little bit, wanting to kind of put his body in a better position to withstand a 162-game season. And he hit the ball really well in spring. Hasn't happened quite to start the regular season, but he's somebody who, if he gets going, really helps lengthen out this lineup.
Feels like with Gabby Moreno, there's obviously still pretty early on in his career, but both seasons that he's played in Arizona so far, it feels like the best offense from him tends to come toward the end of the season. Maybe that's more of a coincidence than anything else. I guess we'll find out as he gets further and further into his career.
Young
But
player getting into his, yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to say after 2 complete seasons, like what narratives will actually hold and which things are just, happen twice and that winds up being it. We're going to jump into some farm system conversation here in a moment. It is admittedly still even younger of a season for most of the Diamondbacks minor league affiliates at this point, but there are a few storylines that have emerged that we're going to touch on in a second. But first, we want to have you hear a few words from our partners over at Foul Territory.
FT fam, Arena Club is the modern way to collect cards or buy or sell or trade or even grade. And we're highlighting slab packs because this is the new way to rip open a pack and get a really good card, AJ. But also, if you're not into the card, like I know you pulled a Bob Gibson card recently, you can get an offer of 90% of the estimated value and just accept it on the spot and give it right back and maybe try again with another slab pack.
I ain't getting rid of my Bob Gibson autograph card. Bob Gibson ain't signing cards anytime soon, so I'm keeping this one. It gets graded for you. There's no mess. The only thing I wish they had bubble gum. Can they virtually send me some bubble gum, Scott? Other than that, it's awesome. You can buy, sell cards. They grade them instantly for you. And physically, you can also get the cards if you want them. So I'm all for this. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah, those cards are in your showroom in the app. And then, of course, you can get the card physically sent to you. So right now, you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/FOUL. That's arenaclub.com/FOUL. Code FOUL for 20% off your first purchase.
And here we are back. Let's talk farm system, Alex. Not much has happened. I know I think the Hillsboro Hops, they started their season, 5 days ago or something like that. So
on Friday, yeah.
on Friday. So we're talking even smaller samples here with some of these minor league guys. But I know you wrote right around when the regular season started for the Major League Club about everyone's assignments, which is always an interesting aspect of the farm system when a new season dawns. Which affiliate is everyone starting out at? So maybe what stood out to you there, and are there any interesting takeaways from, I don't know, like 5 to 10 minor league games that we've seen so far?
Well, Ryan Waldschmidt is up to something pretty hot in Hillsborough. He's 8 for 14 to start the season with 7 ribbies, and he's hit a couple home runs already. So, as for a guy who was drafted number 31 overall last year, comes into spring training, and he's in minor league spring training camp, but gets some at bats in some major league games. Went with the team to Las Vegas to go up against the A's in those couple exhibition games, and kind of showed some pretty promising stuff. And so he's off to a hot start. You mentioned it's been a 5-game sample size for a lot of these guys. I think Hillsborough is a super interesting team to keep an eye on, just because they have Waldschmidt, Demetrio Crisantis, who was kind of the Diamondbacks' breakout prospect last year in Visalia. He's starting off the year there, still super young infielder who had a 57-game on-base streak to end his season last year, which is pretty incredible. Drew Jones is there after he had a much healthier season last year with the Rawhide. And again, the next step in his trajectory there. What kind of steps can he make in this season, if he can kind of show some more maturity or some more pop at the plate, get himself on that track towards the major leagues. So I think Hillsborough is a good one to kind of keep your eye on. And, some other storylines, you look at Reno, it's who are the guys on the doorsteps of being major leaguers, right? Jordan Lawlar's name came up a lot this past week when Cattell got hurt, and it's like, who's going to replace him on the roster? They ultimately go with Tim Tawa, who had a really good year in the minors last year, was off to a great start with Reno so far this season. And, for Lawlar, he hasn't played a whole heck of a lot of second base in his minor league career. He's only played like 3 or 4 or 5 games or something like that. And there are some offensive, boxes that they wanted him to check when they sent him down to start the year in Reno. And, it hasn't been the hottest start of the year for him. But it hasn't been bad. It just, hasn't lit the world on fire to start the season in Reno. There's certain things that I think they want to see to call him up for good at some point when they do. And then, some of the pitchers, right? Gilbert Diaz, Cristian Mena, guys who will be counted on at some point when, something happens in the rotation. Knock on wood, they've been pretty healthy so far when it comes to the starting pitching staff, other than Jordan Montgomery going down with TJ at the start of the year. But then if something happens in July and June, like how are those guys performing and how ready are they to potentially step in and fill some innings if needed? So I think those are kind of the main overarching storylines to look at if you're a Diamondbacks fan curious about the farm system right now.
Looking at some of those, the numbers for some of those pitchers that you mentioned, Diaz in 3 starts has a 4.09 ERA, just 11 innings. So again, samples are so small here, but Mena is off to a really, really good start. 10 2/3 innings so far, only 1 earned run allowed across 2 starts. So he has a 0.84 ERA so far through 2 starts. Tommy Henry, Alex, not as great results there. He has an 11.42 across 2 starts. That's 11 earned runs, 16 hits allowed over 8 2/3 innings. As we think about the Diamondbacks pitching depth, and you certainly hope that they don't wind up needing to tap into that depth as much as they did a season ago when it felt like guys were just getting hurt left and right. But there's a decent chance that all of the names I just mentioned will be needed at some point to start for the Major League Club. And Tommy Henry's an interesting one, Alex. Like, this is a guy who a couple seasons ago looked like one of the more promising young pitchers in this organization. And last season, he got some opportunity early in the year. The Diamondbacks sent him, wound up sending him down fairly early on in the season and never really went back to him. And this year, he's certainly on the depth chart somewhere. But it's just been kind of a weird year and a half for Tommy Henry, where he just hasn't been able to put up the kind of numbers in Reno that you'd really like to see.
Yeah, plus, you're looking at the starting pitching depth, the question of what they do with Ryan Nelson is still kind of looming, and what's the point of no return for him to potentially remain stretched out. He's made 3 appearances out of the bullpen, and they've been, long relief appearances, but he's not pitching 65 pitches in these games. And so when is, that comfortability of having him get stretched back out kind of dissipate a little bit. And then the next guy up is Tommy Henry or Gilbert Diaz or Christian Mena. So it's a bit tricky with that situation, but going back to the guys who are in AAA, it's only a couple of rounds through the rotation, so I don't know how much there is to take out. I haven't watched those specific starts, on video or anything like that to see what happened. But Tommy's been a guy who at least has gotten his feet wet in the major leagues and has thrown some pretty decent innings for them a couple of years ago. I know last year didn't go great, but it's just another option for them. And Diaz and Mena certainly looked really good in spring training. So I think there's some intrigue with that group of guys in AAA, but like, as you mentioned, you knock on wood that you won't really have to use them for too much and can kind of save them for the future.
Switching gears back over to the Major League club, the Diamondbacks at 7-6 are by no means in a terrible position, right? Like 7-6, not
the season
great,
is over, Jesse.
Yeah, well, it based on the Twitter discourse, that's sort of what you'd think at times. But yeah, I mean, certainly not the season is over, but you look at the NL West standings right now, Alex, and the Diamondbacks are certainly more buried than you would expect a 7-6 baseball team to be. Not that they're irreparably buried by any means after 2 weeks. They're 3 games out. I think you can make up 3 games in 5.5 months. That feels pretty doable. But yeah, the NL West has been extraordinarily good so far. The Padres are 10-3. The Giants are 9-3. That's probably the most surprising one out of all these teams. The Dodgers are 10-4. No surprises there. They've actually struggled, I guess, by their standards lately. They just lost a series to the Washington Nationals, as did the Diamondbacks, of course. But yeah, we have the makings here, Alex, of I guess something we expected, like a really competitive NL West. But I don't know if I saw the Giants necessarily being in that mix with the Padres and the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks. And this is not to say that they necessarily are in that mix, because again, you're only 12 games into the season with regard to them at this point. But I don't know, like, to what extent, Alex, are you buying into the San Francisco Giants at this point in the year?
Yeah, the Giants are an interesting one, right? Because, we talked about it before the season started. It's like, what's the path of the Giants being good this year? And, they made a pretty big splash for Willy Adames and went out and got Justin Verlander. And we look at their offense and there's competence there. There's a lot of decent major league hitters. But what we looked at was the pitching and how would that survive losing a Blake Snell and replacing him with Justin Verlander at this stage in his career. And, what do you get out of Jordan Hicks and what do you get out of, whomever? And the pitching's been terrific so far. And that's kind of the reason why they're here. Logan Webb has been a stud as can be expected from him, but they've gotten some good innings out of Landon Roop and Robbie Ray and even Jordan Hicks, and the bullpen for the most part has been pretty solid. So that's kind of the path for them, is that if they can continue to get quality innings from certain guys that we may have had more questions about than some other teams, that'll put them in a pretty good spot. I think their defense for the most part is set up pretty well, especially now you kind of locked up the left side of your infield. You got one of the best defensive catchers, if not the best defensive catcher in the league. Jung-Hoo Lee staying healthy helps out with that too. So I think the Giants certainly, so far look the part of like the frisky team that we thought maybe they could get to. It is super early in the season, so it's hard to be like, all right, the Giants are going to be there at the end of the year. We don't entirely know that, but it's been a pretty good start just in terms of what we've been looking for them to potentially make that jump.
Looking at some of the numbers for specific guys, Logan Webb, you mentioned, yes, Logan Webb is awesome. He has a 1.89 ERA. He's not going to maintain a 1.89, I don't think, but no surprises that he's off to a fast start to the year. Robbie Ray's been pretty good in 2 starts there. He has a 3.18 ERA, but he also has
he flirted with walks. A no-hitter too.
He also has 6 walks and 6 strikeouts, which makes me feel a little bit skeptical when a guy has the same number of walks as strikeouts.
It's Robbie Ray.
It's Robbie Ray. So all bets are off with walk numbers at times. So yeah, we'll see. Justin Verlander has a 6.92. He hasn't started off particularly well. On the offensive side of things there, Wilmer Flores is just like absolutely raking, which just feels very on brand. Like Wilmer Flores, one of those guys who like every other season just like totally rakes and nobody really notices. Mike Yastrzemski is off to a pretty fast start. Interesting that Willy Adames is actually not off to a good start whatsoever. He has a 465 OPS through 12 games. Lamont Wade has a 435 through 12 games. So we'll see what happens with the Giants. I'm still a little bit skeptical, but again, it's 12 games, so I'd probably be skeptical no matter what the numbers said. The other team here that I think stands out the most in the NL West is the Padres, who do currently lead the division at 10-3. I know on your show on Ain't No Fang, shortly before the season started, you and I we had a conversation about the Padres and kind of what our expectations were there. I was maybe not quite as high on them as you were, but I guess you're the winner here, Alex, because they certainly are off to a fast start. So
time to do victory laps after 13 games played. Yeah. I mean, their stars are playing well, right? I mean, Manny Machado's off to a really good start, and Fernando Tatis is off to a really good start. They just lost Jackson Merrill to, I believe it was a hamstring strain, like Tel Marte's injury. So I'm not sure what the timeline is for him, but that could be a pretty brutal loss considering what we talked about before the season started is, we like the stars on this team. They still have a pretty talented roster, but the depth is something that we were a little bit skeptical of. And now you lose kind of the guy who was the engine of the offense last year and certainly was off to a pretty good start this season for, however long he's going to be down right after he signed an extension too. Again, the Ketel Marte parallels, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
But for the rest of those guys, a lot of their better players have gotten off to some pretty good starts. And some of their lesser known pitchers have gotten off to some pretty good starts too. So they've been just a pretty balanced team so far. You still have it's the depth, the rotation depth, the lineup depth. That's something that I'm going to be, questionable of throughout, the early part of the season until they prove otherwise. But it has been a pretty exciting start in San Diego for them. Took care of business against the Braves. That was a big series win for them. They swept Atlanta, didn't they, to start the year?
Yes, they did.
Was that a 4-game sweep too?
I think it was a 4-game sweep. I just know the Braves lost like 6 or 7 games before they managed to win any. It might have been more than that. We'll talk about the Braves here in a second, but Randy Vasquez is off to a good start, Alex, a 1.72 ERA in 3 starts, one of the Padres kind of depth starter pieces. And I guess you could say he's building off what he started toward the end of last season when in a very, very, very important game for the Diamondbacks that you felt was, I don't know if a game is ever really handed to you in baseball because there's just so much randomness, but certainly the Padres were not putting out their best possible lineup and their best possible starter, but Randy Vasquez managed to really shut them down in a game that they absolutely had to have, and he's off to a fast start again. So
careful, you might lose some viewers reminding people of that Padres series at the end of the season.
It wouldn't be the first time that I lost viewers over making people angry, referencing something from the Diamondbacks' dark past. That's sort of something that happens regularly around here. But transitioning from the NL West to just the National League as a whole, I guess a couple of other teams that stand out. The Phillies are off to a fast start. They're 8-3. No huge surprise there. They're the Phillies. They're a team that I certainly expected to contend. I guess the Cubs are off to a notable start. They're 9-6, which isn't anything crazy, but they also have the best run differential in baseball right now at +28. So what do you think, Alex? You buying into the Cubs so far in 2025?
They look really good. Offensively, only the Yankees have scored more runs per game than them. And Kyle Tucker, you take a team that last year, they weren't, a playoff team, but they were still an above 500 ball club. And you add a star player into the middle of the lineup that had some young and emerging talent. And this is kind of what we've seen so far. We saw at the start of the season when the Cubs played the Diamondbacks that Kyle Tucker was starting to get going, and he's continued that. And they've had other guys like Seiya Suzuki and Michael Busch who have been hitting pretty well. The pitching depth may be a little bit of a concern now that they lost Justin Steele to the injured list for the time being. Shota Imanaga was amazing against the Diamondbacks when he pitched there. He's had a pretty good start to the season overall. Was really good against the Dodgers in Tokyo when he started the season there. So this is a Cubs team that I was a little surprised watching them over at Chase Field at how fast and athletic that they were. It's a
Yeah.
good defensive team. And they're starting to put it together with kind of the pop that the lineup now has with Tucker in it, and good defense and some athleticism that's really allowed them to be aggressive on the bases. I mean, they lead the league in stolen bases this season. I know they've played a couple of extra games. 25 stolen bases, 1 caught stealing, which is
That's crazy.
remarkable. So I think if they play this kind of brand of baseball, I think it's going to be tough for them, or tough for teams to stop them. Pitching wise, we'll see exactly what we get and who stays healthy and all that stuff. I mean, ultimately, it's not been a great start for their pitching staff, particularly in the bullpen. So that's kind of the give and take is where, like, offensively, they've looked really impressive. Pitching wise, once you get past like the top of the rotation, Matthew Boyd's also been really good. But once you get past the top of the rotation, then you can have a little bit more questions.
I think people who still view the Cubs as a team that just has a bunch of kind of mediocre, like good but not great players, and they expect them to win 83 or 84 games again, I think those people maybe aren't fully realizing just how good Kyle Tucker can be. Like, especially, of course, this is his walk year. Like, this is a particularly big season for him. It wouldn't shock me if Kyle Tucker just had an outrageous season and goes out and makes $400 million or something ridiculous over the offseason. We did see in that opening series that the Cubs bullpen not great. That's kind of a big concern that I have with them. But we've
Ryan
certainly
Nelson
seen
owns
that.
the Cubs bullpen.
Yes, right, exactly. He destroyed the entire thing. But the Cubs, I think, are probably going to need to add maybe multiple bullpen pieces at the trade deadline, but that's something you can do, right? It's a lot easier to fix a bullpen that time of year than anything else. So the Cubs are interesting to me. I don't know. Are there any other teams in the National League right now that are kind of standing out to you with how good, or I guess also how not good they've been so far in this young season?
Yeah, when we talk about like going into the season and the Diamondbacks having to compete in this National League and how deep it is, I think that's for the most part held true. The teams that you mentioned, the Phillies, the Cubs, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Giants, they've all had really good starts to the season. The Mets are another team that's had a really good start. Even with their offense we thought the Mets were just going to like run away with games with their offense, but the pitching has actually been the strength for the Mets, and then Pete Alonso has gone off for them as well. So it's been kind of what we expected in terms of like what the competition level is going to be in the National League. The one exception has been Atlanta, strangely enough, which is a team that I picked as a surefire playoff team when we talked about them to start the year, which they certainly haven't looked like it yet. Atlanta, I think, is 2-9 right now, a 2-9 record. They're not really scoring, which is last year their offense took a pretty significant dive compared to the year before that. Jason Stark with The Athletic had a great story today kind of going over the Braves' offensive woes, and he had this stat where they scored 947 runs in 2023 and 704 runs in 2024, which is the largest in a full season in the modern era by a team. That's a good story. I recommend it. Certainly, if you're interested in why the Braves have not been particularly great so far this season. Just because that trend has continued into this year. And I feel like they're good enough to where you think they would get past it and Acuna will come back. But it just hasn't been a very good start for them. And the schedule has been pretty difficult to be fair. I mean, they're playing the Phillies right now. They started off with the Padres and the Dodgers. And so it's been kind of tough sledding in terms of their opponents. But that's a team that, talk about like being concerned over the first 2 weeks of the season. It's like, if you're 7-6, there's, maybe a little bit of disappointment, but there's ways to kind of get past that. But being 2-9 is probably a little bit more of an alert going on in fans' heads.
They've scored 34 runs in those 11 games, at least as of the time that we've recorded this. So, they're averaging like 3 runs per game. Looking at that roster, it's a little bit hard for me to believe that the Braves won't turn things around offensively. And they got off to a slower start last year as well. If I'm remembering right, the Phillies kind of opened up this big lead And the Braves weren't able to fully catch up, but they still did find their way into the postseason. Of course, as Diamondbacks fans are well aware, by just going off really in the second half and playing really well down the stretch. So it's hard for me to be overly concerned about them, but you're right. Like, you start 2-9, you have dug yourself quite a bit of a hole, even if you feel like you have the pieces to kind of make up for it. Last thing we wanted to touch on in this episode of Snakes Territory is the upcoming series that the Diamondbacks have this weekend against the Milwaukee Brewers. Alex, at least as of the time of recording this, we do not know who the Brewers starter will be on Friday. So by the time people are watching or listening to this, maybe that's been revealed, but we don't know as of right now. So it's Eduardo Rodriguez against TBD on Friday, Corbin Burnes against Chad Patrick on Saturday, and then Zach Gallen against Freddie Peralta in the finale on Sunday. The fun storyline here, Alex, of course, is that Saturday game where Corbin Burnes faces his former team and Chad Patrick faces his former organization. People may not realize this, understandably so, but Chad Patrick was in the Diamondbacks organization. They traded him to the Oakland A's for Jace Peterson at the 2023 trade deadline. Patrick was then flipped to Milwaukee for Abraham Toro in a separate trade. So now this former member of the Diamondbacks farm system is now in Milwaukee. He just made his big league debut earlier in this young season, and he's off to a decent start. He has a 2.45 ERA in 3 games. I think it's 2 starts, one bullpen appearance. So that Saturday game, Alex, that's a legendary pitching matchup right there. Chad Patrick against his former team and Corbin Burnes against his former team all at the same time.
Yeah, for anybody counting on the Corbin Burnes revenge game, they didn't probably account for the Chad Patrick revenge game. It should be an eventful night at Chase. It's also Eugenio Suarez bobblehead night, so it's going to be a packed crowd anyway. But it's also Corbin Burnes' home debut with the Diamondbacks, since he made his Diamondbacks debut at Yankee Stadium, pitched at Nationals Park, and now finally the little long-awaited home debut for Corbin Burnes. Yeah, it should be an interesting series. As of now, I just looked it up on MLB.com. It still says TBD for who's starting for the Brewers in that first game. Chad Patrick, you mentioned the intrigue there as a former Diamondbacks prospect, and Freddie Peralta's been terrific to start the year. And this is a Brewers team that was in a lot of headlines kind of on the wrong side of them, because they were the team that got bludgeoned by the torpedo bats in the opening weekend of the series against the Yankees. But since then, they've been pretty good, and Jackson Chourio has been tremendous for them. He's off to a great start. They had those games against the Reds that were bizarre, that they kept winning like 1-0, and the Reds could never score any runs. So the Brewers pitching has certainly been a lot better since that Yankee Stadium series. And these are 2 teams that have had some pretty good battles over the last couple of years. I mean, last year, obviously the Diamondbacks looked like they were going to sweep the Brewers in Milwaukee. And then that, 8-0 game happened and kind of set up the last week of the season to be a little bit different than a lot of people anticipated. And 2 years ago, the Diamondbacks ended the Brewers season, in Milwaukee in the postseason. So these teams have had some pretty good battles over the years. I think it's a fun early season series. I wish I knew who was pitching tomorrow, but we'll probably find that out as soon as we hit hanging up on this thing. So yeah, it should be a pretty eventful weekend over at Chase, and the Diamondbacks are building off of their best game of the year. So do they, fall back down to what they look like, in Washington, or do they kind of build off of that and string along some of these and get themselves on a winning streak that we saw from the Dodgers and the Padres and the Giants to start the season?
The Brewers have allowed 74 runs so far in 13 games, which is a pretty big number. That's somewhere between 5 and 6 runs allowed per game, I think closer to 6. But it's important to note what you mentioned earlier, which is that the Brewers allowed an outrageous number of runs in their opening series against the Yankees. And since then, I think their pitching has actually been pretty good. The offense has scored 68 runs in 13 games, which is a big number. That's more than 5 runs per game from an offense that I think some people were a little skeptical of entering the season. You mentioned Chourio has been very, very good, especially of late. I believe he was 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts, if I'm not mistaken, on opening day. So for all the Brewers fans who are very, very concerned about their young up and coming star, it looks like he's going to be just fine. He has bounced back very nicely from that. So should be an interesting weekend out at Chase Field. The Brewers come in 7-6. The Diamondbacks come in 7-6. As you mentioned, these are two teams with some history, so it should be interesting to see how it all turns out. That is everything that we have in this episode 6 of Snakes Territory. We very much appreciate all of you joining us. You can follow each of us here on all of the social media world. I am at Jesse N. Friedman. Alex, you're Alex J. Weiner, if I'm not mistaken. Am I getting that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Alex J. Weiner, that's Weiner.
Thank you for that.
Yes. People sometimes don't know how to spell Friedman. I should probably spell that out more often than I do. It's Friedman for those who maybe don't know. It's spelled like Friedman. Just remember it that way.
I before E, except after a W in my name specifically.
Right, exactly. Alex is a contrarian. He doesn't follow the rest of the English the rest of the English rules, which we all know English basically doesn't have rules because they're all broken like 117 times. But anyway, you can also follow our show here at Snakes Territory. As I mentioned earlier, Alex does an outstanding job covering the Diamondbacks. You can read his work over at arizonasports.com, and you can find his Diamondbacks podcast, Ain't No Fang, on all of the various podcast platforms. We'd also really appreciate it if you would drop a like and a comment here on YouTube. If you're joining us on YouTube, it really helps with the YouTube algorithm. We very much appreciate that. And then wherever you get your podcasts, if you're someone who likes to listen to the show, if you'd consider leaving a rating and review for us over there on Snakes Territory, we would very much appreciate it. Alex, anything else before we say goodbye here?
No, just arizonasports.com and, big weekend ahead for the Diamondbacks. So, keep it locked in with all the coverage. And thanks for having me on, man. It's always fun talking baseball with you. And, I appreciate getting to listen to you talk about Diamondbacks baseball on this platform with Jack. And so it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Alex. We'll definitely be having Alex again on the show sometime soon. You'll be a regular, Alex. We'll definitely
We can do another home and home, something like that.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe the next time I'm on your show, I won't babble on for 2 hours or whatever it was. It was still a good time. But anyway, thank you again all so much for joining us here on Snakes Territory. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back with another episode very, very soon.